topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Connected Table Live. We're your hosts, Melanie Young and David Ransom, your insatiably curious culinary couple. We love traveling the world to introduce you to the people and places and wines and foods that we try and explore and discover. And we're going to do it again today, right, David?
Yes, we are, Melanie.
First of all, you can listen to our show live every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, and you can listen to us on about 65 podcast channels. So we hope you do that, share, and follow us at the Connected Table. Today, we're going to take you to Umbria, the green heart of Italy, and specifically to an area that David and I really had not spent much time visiting other than maybe an afternoon tour of its world-famous Duomo. We're talking about Orvieto. We had the great opportunity to spend, I think it was 5 days, immersing ourselves in Orvieto and its wines. Thank you to the Consortio for Orvieto for helping us arrange this trip. We learned a lot, and there are a lot of takeaways, but let's start with location.
Well, Orvieto is about an hour and a half north of Rome. Mm-hmm. So it's in Umbria, which is the one landlocked province in the boot of Italy, so in the peninsula of Italy. There are a couple up north that go into the Alps, etc. But in the boot of Italy, Umbria is the only one. So it's landlocked. It is rolling hills, mountains. So it does, because it touches the Apennines as well, which is the spine of Italy, as they call it. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful area. It's
also a very strategic area, and I'm going to explain 3 big reasons. One, Orvieto borders Lazio. What's in Lazio? Rome, the center of the Vatican. And so Orvieto turned out to be a big summer refuge for 5 popes in Middle Ages. This is an area that dates back to the Etruscans. It also was where they hid out.
Yeah, it was actually a place of refuge during wartime.
Yeah.
for the popes at that time in the 1200s and 1300s, because obviously there were a lot of sieges and turmoil that happened during that time as well in the Middle Ages. And so when it hit the fan, the popes would take off and either go to, one time they went to Avignon, and they lived there for a while in France. But for a lot of times, 5 of them actually went to Umbria, to Orvieto. And one of the reasons the great cathedral in Orvieto, which is so beautiful, was built was to help with this process.
And a few more things. So we're talking about the 13th century. So Orvieto is strategically located between Rome and Florence. That's a major trade route and also a major route for pilgrimages. You're talking about Assisi, which is also in Umbria. So yes, the 5 popes, Urban IV, Gregory X, Martin IV, and Nicholas IV, and Boniface VIII, in case you're into that, all sought refuge there. But there's another strategic reason. Orvieto sits high atop an outcropping of tufa rock and volcanic stone. What we learned, and it was a big surprise for us because of the strategic location, which is great for the wines, that this is a volcanic region, although we saw nary a volcano, but there were volcanoes at one time, and Europe's largest crater lake, Bolsena, which is still there. That lake effect and those volcanic residual tufa and rock is what creates some of the most exciting terroirs in Italy to make a diverse, styles of wine. And we had the great opportunity to attend a presentation at the Consortio offices led by Nicola Barbarani, whose family is making beautiful wines there, to better understand the 4 terroirs that define Orvieto wines. And it was a blind tasting. I thought it was really interesting.
It was.
Yeah. So what are we talking about? Well, first of all, we're talking about a region that's still predominantly known for its white wines, Orvieto DOC, Orvieto Classico DOC, and Orvieto Superiore, which is specific guidelines on when that wine may be released and alcohol levels. Overall, though, what was exciting about the white wines are that they are crisp, refreshing, predominantly made of, I believe, 60% Grechetto. And then the secondary grape is Trebbiano Toscano, which they call Procanico here. And there may be some other wines. They were wonderful, but very different based on where they were grown, right?
Yeah, and people who think they remember the name Grechetto, because Orvieto is also close to the southeastern section of Tuscany. You may know that grape from being grown in that region of Tuscany as well.
Exactly. And also in Lazio. I mean, Orvieto is like strategically located between Lazio and Tuscany. And some of the wineries we visited were very short drive to Tuscany.
You know, it's interesting. The people of the area of Orvieto consider themselves to be part of Tuscia, Tuscia, which is a non-political region comprised of parts of Umbria, Lazio, and Tuscany, because it's really a corner of Umbria, even though Orvieto is technically in Umbria. But the region that makes wine is really one of the only cross-border winemaking regions in Italy.
Yeah. It's really unique. And so we like to start with that sense of place. So picture a beautiful medieval city sitting atop a outcropping of rock. So it's very fortified. And what's really interesting is below the city is a network of underground caves. Orvieto is second only to Naples for its size of a network of underground caves. We did a great tour with Orvieto Underground. These caves were used in medieval times for everything, including making wine, tools. We saw pigeonniers. Apparently pigeons were a big commodity.
And still are. They were in almost every restaurant that we ate in Orvieto. There was pigeon on the menu. So it's a dish that's still prevalent and was very much farmed, as I guess you could say, back in the old days in these caves that are underneath. And there's 1,200 caves underneath Orvieto. You wonder how it can stand up, but they obviously made the network of caves quite successfully because it's still going 1,000 years later. Yeah, and
some of them are now converted into tool shed, active businesses or homes or restaurants, and they're in the caves. It's also where people hid out during the war, and they served as bomb shelters. But you must go, if you go, do an Orvieto underground tour, because it's really quite remarkable and important, because these caves, are caves where wine was made, and you could see old winemaking tools at that time. You can also walk around, which we did, the entire walkway of Orvieto. It took us about 2 hours in the heat, but you can see how it's a fortified city. And as David mentioned, the Orvieto Cathedral, which is truly majestic. It was, we did a guided tour, and you must, because there's a very sacred relic in there that is, very important in Catholicism. But the Orvieto Cathedral was partially funded by revenue from sales of Orvieto wines. The papal court loved Orvieto wines. They were in favor, much like in France and Avignon with the Châteauneuf du Pape. These are the Châteauneuf du Pape wines of Italy, the Orvieto wines, and they had very robust sales. And as we said, that's what partially paid for the funding of this majestic cathedral, which you must tour.
And the winemaking history goes back, as Melanie mentioned, to Etruscan times, and there's artifacts that have been discovered all over the Mediterranean of wine having been shipped in amphora and clay pots with an Orvieto seal on it to different regions around the Mediterranean. So it was a very well-known wine, not just in Orvieto, but around Southern Europe as well.
So, you're talking about a wine that was in favor for millennia and was an important part of trade, and really had a defined moment. And then for a while, you didn't hear about Orvieto wines. And we learned that there has been an Orvieto wine revolution, even though it's one of the oldest wine producing regions dating the Tresons. The DOC, the controlled designation of Orvieto, was established in 1971. It's actually one of the oldest DOCs in Umbria. And since the past 40 some odd years, they've been really focusing on upgrades and modernization and trying to make terroir-driven, lower alcohol, which is interesting, wines that are of today that are expressive of their region. And as we noted, Niccolo Barbarani gave us a really great opportunity to try the wines as a blind tasting. And these are the whites. We'll get into the red shortly. It's predominantly still a white wine region. We tasted wine from the 4 soils, which are alluvial and clay, sandy, clay and limestone, and volcanic. And we were reminded over and over again that this entire area was covered by the sea at some point. And when we visited several of the wineries, we saw elements of that. We saw oyster shells that they had found in the soils, and snail shells, I guess, big giant snail shells and other nautical
style shells.
Thank you. That was really cool to me.
Very interesting.
You know, because we're inland, so you don't think about that.
And Tuscany's that way too. If you go to the southern regions of Tuscany, you'll find there's a lot of volcanic soil, a lot of it, really the same soils that you find in Umbria, but they have a lot of that sea sediment as well, which really helps kind of deliver minerality, shall we say, to the wines. Yeah, the wines have a lot of minerality.
The depending on where they were, the soils, some of them had more tropical floral notes, jasmine. We saw a lot of oleander being grown. I could taste that in some of the wines. Then, in like the more volcanic area, you're going to get stonier, more austere wines with lots of minerality. A great range, but I would say all in all, what impressed me was that they had great aromas and flavors. They're crisp and dry. And I love the fact that all of them most are under 14% alcohol. We tasted one that was like 9.5%. On average, it was like 11 to 12. So these are terrific wines.
Overall. I find that really a feat of great winemaking too, because considering that the fact there's global warming, we all know that, and climate change, et cetera. And we were told countless times while we were in Umbria, and we went to 2 regions in Umbria this trip, all over, that people are now picking their grapes earlier to make sure that they have lower alcohol percentages in their wines, because otherwise they just get too hot, and they want to maintain that balance and drinkability. So they're picking earlier and earlier. So it's kind of a battle between the science of winemaking and climate change to make sure that they can still do what they do. And they're doing a great job of that in Orvieto.
Yeah, we talked to one producer, and Enzo de Barbi, and he's starting harvest in July. We'll get into the wines, really terrific sparkling wines. But throughout this particular trip, during an exceptional heat wave we experienced in Italy, the temperatures were reaching 100 degrees. Our question was, how is that affecting your harvest and also your Ferragosto vacation? And everybody's moving up harvest. And I also noticed that many producers are on vacation in July now so that they can come back and deal with the earlier harvest. Yep. It's a common issue in many places. We want to touch on 2 other categories of the wines that are important. As we said, white wines are predominant with 60% Grechetto, and it's a blend of 60% Grechetto and about 40%, 60% Grechetto and Trebbiano Toscano, and 40% could be other grapes. There is also, this is unique, something called Muffa Nobili, which means noble rot. And Orvieto DOC is the only region in Italy that produces these noble rot wines, much like Sauternes, due to the wonderful lake effect in the river, because you've got the Tiber River going through and the lake. These are wines, as we said, that are made from Botrytis grapes. They have a minimum alcohol level of 16. They're sweet wines and quite wonderful, made in limited quantity.
Very limited.
We tasted like 3.
And I'm going to add to that, it's consistently make, because there are other regions that can get botrytis in their grapes, but it's not a consistency.
And this is part of the DOC. Well, it's Muffa, means rot.
Right.
I had to look it up. But beautiful wines. And that was kind of an aha discovery as well. There are red wines made. The Orvietano Rosso DOC is a newer DOC established in 1998. Like Orvieto whites, these are blended wines, something that you also pointed out during our trip, David, as you talked about how what sets these wines apart is that they're blended.
I couldn't agree more. And I did say that. I said that actually to the producers who were
Right.
some of the producers were querying us. We're not new to the game, but we're kind of new to get into the modern game and export our wines. And so they were asking us questions like normally happens, shall we say. What do you think would be a key selling point? And I said, the fact that you're making blends.
Yeah.
When you go to Italy, all you hear about is try my Pinot Grigio, try my Vermentino, try my Sangiovese, but you're actually producing wines that are blends by trade. And by definition, Orvieto wines are a blend. You can only put 60% maximum of a certain grape, which is Grechetto, into those wines. So you have to blend other grapes into it. So you're creating blends from the start, which is really the art of winemaking, right, Melanie?
Yeah.
And so that's the defining thing for me. The Orvieto wines not only are they really good, in my opinion, but they're creating a style of wine by creating these blends. And the blends they're utilizing different grapes to do it, but they're doing a really good job of it. And that's a key feature for them.
It is a key feature. I mean, the only other region we've been to where it's predominantly blended was in the Lucchese area. Those are field blends. But these are, the Orvieto DOC has very strict disciplinary guidelines about the blends, where the Lucchese wines and Pisani wines were kind of like whatever.
They were like the California
Yeah,
do whatever you want concept.
Be creative.
Yeah.
These are very strict guidelines for quality control. Not that the Lucchese was a great quality, but it's just you must follow the rules. So Orvietano Rosso DOC are also blended reds, much smaller subzone. Mainly, it's like almost 10 different varietals. So I won't get into them, but the main ones are Aleatico, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Canaiolo Rosso, Ciliegiolo, Merlot.
And of course, Sangiovese.
Yeah, Sangiovese, Montepulciano, and Pinot Noir. Those are the main ones. And it's like a 70-30. So 70 can be the dominant reds and 30% of others.
Yeah.
I think the wines we tasted of the few were Sangiovese dominant or Montepulciano dominant, although we did taste a fantastic Merlot, which we'll get into. Right? So just a little quick note, the Orvieto DOC was established in 1971. As I said, it's one of the oldest DOCs in Umbria. So they are trying really hard to highlight the quality of DOC wines. And there's a Classico. So there's Orvieto DOC, there's Orvieto Classico DOC, which is a specific subzone. There's Orvieto Superiore DOC. The wines have to be released after March 1, and they have a slightly elevated alcohol. And then there's Orvietano Rosso DOC, which is the red
designation for the red wines.
We got this great map. I wish I could have everybody see it. It explains the wonderful different regions by color and the soils. And it was really educational. Yeah. I was grateful for that because I like maps and I like blind tastings. It really tests your palate. However, we also got to meet with producers as well. And we visited, 5 producers?
We
David?
visited a bunch of producers. We also had dinner with a couple others. And really it was a lovely 5-day trip for us. And so let's get into talking about some of the producers, shall we?
Sure. Who do we want to start with?
I think we should start with the first one that we went to, which was Argile.
Yeah.
And Argillae. Argile is the name of the winery. It's started in the early 2000s. It is owned by the DeCosimo family, and Julia DeCosimo is really the proprietor. She's the only one in the family that actually is part of the winery and makes decisions and works at the winery day to day. The rest of the family, most of them live in Tuscany and have a spirits company, and they make spirits and things like fertilizer as well. So they use great products to make other things other than wine. So it was kind of a natural fit to eventually start Argile themselves and have Julia take over and create the wines. They're fabulous wines. I met Julia first in New York City at a wine tasting lunch that I did for Orvieto wines and Umbrian wines in general in October 2023. And we kept in touch. So we went there first, and it was a wonderful, wonderful tasting. They make some great wines. They make a lot of whites, and they make a couple of reds.
So let's point out 2 wines that in each we'll do. And there's two. One we had, which they're very proud of, the Signorello Bianco Superiore.
Mhm.
It's named after a very famous artist, Luca Signorelli, who is a Renaissance painter. You can see some of his work in the Orvieto Cathedral. Very famous. And he's considered the father of colorismo. This is a classic Grechetto. It's actually a Grechetto, Verdelho, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay blend. So kind of interesting and different, very aromatic. And there's also a little bit of Malvasia in it, which gives it that little sweet kick.
Yeah, and that no, go ahead. I can't remember I can't remember the word.
So it's called Signorello Bianco Superiore, and we tasted the 2024s. The other one that I think is important to note when we did the tour is that they are now experimenting with amphora. And their first one is called Primo d'Amphora. It's a 2022, and they're making it in terracotta amphora. She started the project, Julia, and is experimenting with it. And it's a blend of Grechetto and Canaiolo Bianco, which there's another name for it, don't ask me, and Malvasia. It is, I noted a lot of sapidity and elderflower and muskmelon in it. Very interesting, because I think it was the only amphora wine we tasted in this trip. And these wines are available in the United States.
They are. It's Drupeggio is the name for Canaiolo Bianco. That's the local name for it.
Okay, I'm glad you said it.
Kind of like arpeggio, but started by.
Because I wasn't sure if my notes were accurate, but it says Drupeggio.
Drupeggio, which is Canaiolo. Canaiolo is a red grape that's grown pretty widely in that area, and also in Tuscany as well. But Canaiolo Bianco obviously is an offshoot of that.
Yeah, what I love when we travel is we get it's known as this here, but over here we call it the Trebbiano Toscano, but it's Procanico over here.
They made at Argile, Julia and her team make a number of different Grechetto based Orvieto Biancos, and they're really all lovely. Some are a little bit more crisp and light, kind of everyday drinkers, and then others are obviously have a little bit more weight to them because they either spend time in oak or they spend time in amphora, spend time on the skin, spend time on the lees, etc. The Primo d'Amphora was very nice. One of the ones that I liked the most was the Panata Orvieto DOC Superiore, which was the vintage we tasted was 2022. And this is a 70% Grechetto blend. And about 15% of that is fermented in oak as well. So they kind of play around a little bit with the winemaking on that wine, and it's really just a delightful wine. We actually had it out at dinner in a couple of restaurants too, because we enjoyed it so much, and just couldn't get enough of it, to be honest. We really loved it. Now
they make a red Argila. It's called Sinuoso 2023. It's an IGT Rosso. It's not made in the Orvietano DOC. It's a blend of Merlot, Cabernet, and Montepulciano, 35% each. Sinuoso means soft and smooth and sinuous, which this wine was. I thought it was a really musky, little musk and sherry, currants and violet. It was very nice. And that Montepulciano adds to me a musky nose and flavor to everything.
Yeah, Montepulciano is, you don't get Montepulciano much east of where we were or west of where we were, because it's mostly grown in Abruzzo and the Marche. But you get some of it in Umbria as well. And,
isn't Umbria bordered by Abruzzo?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So you get it further east, but not further west. And it's an interesting grape to me. I think it has a little bit of a rusticity to it as well, which I don't mind.
No, I don't mind it. It to me, it's musky rustic.
Depends on what you're doing. But yeah, this was a very nice wine. Yeah, the Sinuoso. They also make a rosé. They don't make the rosé from local fruit, though. They actually make their rosé in the Maremma, and it's because Julia really wanted to make a rosé, and she felt that she didn't quite have the tools to do that with the grapes that she had growing in Orvieto, so she decided to kind of outsource the vineyard for it. They rent the vineyard in the Maremma, and they make the wine over there, and then they bring it back and sell it.
It's called Rose.
It's a nice wine.
Rose Tum.
It's a very nice wine. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I did too. It's a Grenache Syrah blend, so you're going to get that.
Yeah, it's kind of a Provençal style rosé,
which I love.
So porch pounder. Great stuff.
But sometimes you just want that.
Anyway,
great, terrific wine.
So let's move on to the next one. The next winery that we visited was De Cugnano de Barbi, and Enzo Barbi was our was our host and the owner of the winery, and his family actually is from has been producing wine in Orvieto since the 1970s, and their first vintage after they planted vines was in 1978. Beautiful piece of property, kind of along a ridge with vines down both sides, and they also have some beautiful underground caves there as well. Really nice wines, and the family actually came from Brescia, which is in northern Italy.
Right. He's related to the Cinelli Colombini family,
Correct.
Donatella.
Yeah, and so we had a delightful afternoon on his terrace and porch by the pool overlooking the valley and the lake, and tasted through some of his wines, and I just loved all of them. They're very big on sparkling wine.
I'm looking for them on our map to point to people, but I can't.
They're very big on sparkling wine, and he was the one that told us he was picking his fruit in July.
He is.
Now that I remember,
because we're going to have him on the show, but we're trying to work around harvest. They're actually
now let's clarify it. It's not all their fruit. They're just starting to pick their fruit in July. So
starting.
So they can get the right acidity and make sure that they've got, make sure that they don't have too much sugar in the fruit.
But here's the fact. They were the first producer at Orvieto DOC to make sparkling wine. They make 12,000 bottles of Metodo Classico. So this is an important sparkling wine producer in Orvieto. And and because of that, they're working on gently navigating the harvest and the weather to make that happen. And you're right, sweeping views. Every winery we went to had sweeping views.
That's true.
It was pretty amazing. I mean, you're talking about a great area. Let's talk about some of the wines here. I'll start. I love the Pas Dosage, Metodo Classico 2020.
The zero. Zero.
Yeah, zero.
That's the name of it. Zero. The zero.
Oh, zero. Yeah. So it's zero dosage.
So it's Pas Dosage. Yeah. So it's a Brut Nature. Yeah. Very nice wine.
Chardonnay Pinot Noir 50-50, well aged. I just thought it was terrific, and of course 12.5 ABV. We were told by the Villa Franciacorta people that more people want zero dosage sparkling wines, and Enzo echoed that.
Yes.
He said that's definitely the truth.
And for this wine, it's not a light, no sugar style wine. They age it 45 months on the lees. It's 40% Chardonnay, 60% Pinot Noir. And nicely for us, and I know you love this, 12.5% alcohol.
Yeah, I love it.
It's not high ABV.
Very nice wines and versatile with a range of foods. I just think those zero dosage wines go with so many things.
And it's grown in a kind of a sandy clay mix, and it's got a tremendous, beautiful minerality and salinity to it. I just love this wine. Yeah.
What else did we try that we liked there? There were some beautiful wines. And by the way, they have a villa you can rent. I always ask about that.
Well, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about their two Orvieto DOC wines. They have a Classico and they have a Classico Superiore, and they're quite different from each other. The first is the Orvieto Classico DOC, which is called Frumento, Frammento, and it's a lovely wine made from Grechetto, Vermentino, Sauvignon Blanc, and Procanico. What's Procanico?
Trebbiano Toscano.
Right.
And they kept changing that everywhere we went.
Yeah.
They would, and we'd be like, just call it Procanico, it'll be different.
Right. Well, I think they should, because there's definitely a bunch of Trebbianos out there.
Yeah. So why not say Procanico? I thought that was interesting because it had the Vermentino. I love Vermentino and Sauvignon Blanc, so it really added a lot of white pepper. This is where the oleander was all over the place. I could taste that in there, lemongrass and thyme. Beautiful. It's in stainless. And I like that wine a lot. And then there was the Mare Antico Classico Superiore, which is 55% Grechetto, 20% Vermentino, 20% Chardonnay, 5% Procanico. And that was 95% stainless and then 5% oak on leaves. So that was a completely different style wine. What were your impressions?
It was. I thought it was definitely an elevated viscosity to it and richness to it. I thought it was a really great gastronomic wine.
Yeah.
Whereas the Frumento would be a great everyday lunch style wine. This you could sit down and have a roast chicken with if you wanted to.
Yeah, really, really nice. And as you mentioned, so the winery is on the northeast edge of Orvieto. I was looking; it's hard to see on this map. And he said to us, "Well, I don't know. He was a really nice guy. He said." They're a leader in the sparkling wines. And many people, when I told them we were going to Orvieto, they said, make sure you go to Designation of Origin for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great visit.
Yeah, they're very well known for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. He was actually disgorging some sparkling wine when we showed up, and they do it down in the cave, and there's a cave that's probably 200, 300 meters deep into the side of the hill that you walk into, and then it just goes straight back into the hill, and it's lined with riddling racks filled with bottles of champagne that's aging on the lees, and it's just.
These caves are so unique to this area. It's incredible. And yet in the distance, you see the Apennines. I mean, it's really quite remarkable.
Right. So they do a couple of reds too,
which
I was pretty happy about. The Battito, Battito, is an Umbria Rosso IGT. It's a Cabernet based, or a Sangiovese based wine that's blended with Cabernet Sauvignon, that is, and Merlot. And this was the lighter of the two. It had it had a good acidity to it.
Nice,
so it was
violets
lighter,
and raspberries.
fresh.
Yeah.
More of an everyday kind of wine. And then they had the AD 1212, which was an Umbria Rosso as well.
IGT.
They both are. But this was 70% Syrah.
That was a surprise,
which was
right?
a surprise for me, yeah. And then the balance was Cabernet Merlot. So very interesting wine for me.
Yeah, much more rich and medium tannins, and so you get the spice and blackberry and dark cherry. And we love Syrah. I'd like to see more people drinking Syrah. I really would. Next winery, Barberani. We referenced Niccolo Barberani earlier in this show. It's a family-owned estate in the Classico region overlooking Lake Cabara. Again, out there, astoundingly beautiful. And you see this lake, which is man-made, unlike Bolzano, which is shaped by a volcanic crater. It was established in 1961 by Giuseppe Barberani. They have a enoteca literally right across from the Orvieto Cathedral. We met him there. These are soils that have sedimentary rock, limestone, and fossil particles. We saw a lot of the particles there. Let's talk about those wines. There are a few that we adored. I'll start. Luigi and Giovanna, which is their Orvieto Classico Superiore. David, you've got your notes up. Mine I'm still pulling everything off my phone.
They do a couple of Orvieto Classicos. One is Classico Normale, as I like to call it. The other is Classico Superiore.
Right.
The Castagnolo was the Orvieto Classico. And we like this because it's only 11.5% alcohol. So it's low alcohol, which is, as we said, something they're striving to work to do in this region to keep their wines from getting too hot as things change. This was a 60% Grechetto, 40% Trebbiano blend, and just delightful. Floral, jasmine notes, apple and peach. Really just a nice, light, crisp, everyday white wine that I'd be happy to have in my fridge. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the next one was the Luigi e Giovanna, which is an ode to the family.
Right.
Ode to the parents.
Grandpa and his wife.
Yeah. And it's an Orvieto Classico Superiore. Again, this is 80% Grechetto and 20% Trebbiano. But this one is in oak on the lees for 18 months. So it's a much richer, more viscous, lovely wine. And what's nice about it, we talked about Botrytis earlier, or the Muffa Nobile. This has grapes that are affected by Botrytis.
Partially.
In it.
Yeah.
So you get that little bit of, you get that richness from the Botrytis portion,
right?
Which blends into the wine. Beautiful wine. Again, 12% alcohol, so light by today's standards. Great mineral-driven, herby, lots of salinity, beautiful complexity.
Love this wine.
I just love this wine. We had a couple of bottles of that on our road as well.
Yeah, when we were dining out. Just fabulous wine.
Yeah, just a lovely wine. And then there were a couple others that they made. One's Vinoso, which is an Umbria IGT, which was 100% Grechetto. They couldn't call it Orvieto Classico or Orvieto Superiore DOC wine because it is 100% of one particular grape. So it's not a blend. And this was really interesting. It's an orange wine. So it spent 3 years on the skins, doing skin contact, and was really interesting to me.
Yeah, I like that one. I liked all the wines here.
Very complex. And
The reds?
Then they made a couple of reds as well. Fresco, which was a 80% Sangiovese, and then 10% each of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. You know how I love
Again,
Merlot.
we're talking about blended wines.
Yeah. So this was the kind of everyday red, nice and light, good acidity to it, good freshness to it. Another one that they made was called Polvento, which was, again, not a blend.
Right.
100% Sangiovese Grosso grapes. Now, Sangiovese Grosso is the clone of Sangiovese that they make, that they grow in Montalcino, which is what Brunello is made from. So this is a big, powerful style of Sangiovese wine. Lots of ripe cherry notes and a beautiful wine. I think it's their flagship red, don't you?
It is. It
Yeah.
gets a lot of high marks by the hoi polloi.
So these vines were planted 35 years ago. So it's got good. The vines have good age to it, and it spends 18 months in large oak casks. Just a lovely wine, really a beautiful wine. And then the Calchaya Muffa Nobile was their Botrytis affected late harvest wine, which is 50% Grechetto and 50% Trebbiano.
Beautiful wine.
Again, just a beautiful wine.
Yeah, it sells out. I mean, it was sold out at the Enoteca because we were looking for it. But if you can get your hands on Calchaya or Orvieto DOC, the Classico Superiore Muffa Nobile, get some. Really beautiful wines.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that winery again is Barbarani. I don't have in my notes who their importer is, though, in the United States. But now we're going to move on to a very well-known name in the Italian wine world, Famiglia Cottarella. Yes, of that Cottarella fame, Riccardo Cottarella. And they're in Montecchio, and it's woman-run. The daughter runs it. Domenica, I think, is her name.
We actually had her on our show a number of years ago.
Yeah,
didn't we?
for the introduction of their just amazing Montiani Merlot, which we tasted.
Gorgeous.
But we tasted through several wines. Okay, let's just talk about, we've been talking about wineries that are in remote areas, surrounded by cliffs and caves and views. This is a big winery.
It is.
This is like going to an embassy. I mean, this is like there's flags everywhere and a giant parking lot. But it's not. It's a big place. It's their flagship winery. We learned, and there's just a lot of beautiful artwork and tasting rooms, and you just know you're just in Castello Cottarella in a winery, right? Yeah.
And the wines, of course, are top notch.
And 1.5 million bottles. So we're talking about a lot of wine produced. So interestingly, they don't produce an Orvieto DOC. So this is kind of like the ringer in the group, but I'm glad we went because it's such a well-known, thankfully woman-run winery. It kind of, everyone said go. So what the first one we tasted was a Verdellucci, which is a Vermentino, 100%, so not blended, and it was 10.5%.
Well, this was an experimental wine.
It was experimental wine.
And it's something that they had decided they wanted to try to make something that was a wine that had low ABV that could stand up to other wines that maybe have 1 or 2% more alcohol.
Tasted like Vermentino Light.
Yeah, it was good though.
It's good for Vermentino Light. The other one
kind of reminded me of like having a nice Vino Verde or something like that from Portugal. You know, about 10% alcohol.
That's about right.
5%.
Easy to quaff, but kind of interesting. And the Verdellucci 2024 is also, these are all IGT because they're not DOC. Only 13.5%, 60% Pinot Bianco, and I love this, 30% Semillon, and 10% Grechetto. So you've got that aromatic with a touch of creamy waxiness, floral, bright, really interesting wine, I thought. Yeah,
very nice. And 13% alcohol is obviously a lot more than the other Verdellucci.
Yeah, but still average for that. Average, not 10%, but it was beautiful wine.
Yeah, and then they do a couple other Biancos. They do a Lazio Bianco, which we tried, which was interesting because, as we mentioned earlier in the show, Orvieto borders on the province of Lazio, and the Orvieto DOC straddles the border and goes into both sides of Lazio and Umbria. So it's obviously easy for them to make Lazio wines as well.
I have in my notes.
There are a couple other wineries over there that do that as well.
Yeah, I have in my notes. It's 100% Rochetto.
Yeah.
Roscetto,
Which
which
is
he says related Greco to Tufo.
But I've never heard of the grape before.
No.
Yeah.
So, like Italy has like hundreds of grapes. My notes, 12.5% ABV, mango, lychee, salty, kind of salty in the back palate, slightly creamy because it undergoes mallow and barrel aged.
Mhm.
It's an aromatic quaver in a good way.
I liked it.
Anyway.
I liked it.
Okay.
And then they also make a couple of reds.
Yeah.
And of course they made that beautiful Montiano
Fabulous
red, which is their top of the line red wine. It's 100% Merlot. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's talk about the Trentani, which is a 50% Sangiovese, 50% Merlot blend. It has minimal oak, so it's on the fruitier, more fruit-driven side, shall we say, and not a lot of oak. So a nice everyday red, a good quaffing wine, as I like to say.
Yeah.
And just a delightful wine. And there's also the Marcelliano, which was a Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc blend.
Yes, lovely.
As well. Again, the Cabernet Franc kind of adds a softness to it and softens out the Cabernet Sauvignon, which can tend to be a little bit on the tannic side. So this kind of brings that level down a little bit, right? And just a nice approachable wine, nice chocolate notes in it.
I had chocolate covered cherries.
Yeah, just delicious.
Yeah, delicious.
And then of course there's the Montiano, which we know and love. And it's 100% Merlot. It's their flagship wine. It's just a beautiful, beautiful wine. And they really spare no expense in making this wine.
It's a beautiful wine. I have strawberry, raspberry, currants, and smooth and silky, just like your perfect Merlot.
Yeah.
Right.
It's aged in French oak barrique, which is the 225-liter barrel, the barrel that most people recognize when they walk into the winery, and 75% of that is new. So there's a lot of expense that goes into making this wine as well. Yeah, to keep turning over those barrels.
Absolutely.
To create this wine, and it's just a lovely wine. Yeah, really. It
was a very nice
a world-class wine.
Yeah, really wonderful. And then one last winery visit, and I'm watching our time. Vita Longa, which means long life. And we did a lot of Vita Longa to a long life toast with this family. It's a producer of Rosso Orvietano DOC. Again, David, I thought we were driving forever to get to this winery. We just drove down like dirt roads. Turns out there's a restaurant there and an agriturismo, which you kind of want to do because you're going to like plop after you eat and drink. But it's only 10 kilometers from the Tuscan border. It's a I can't pronounce it, Meravaglia family. We met with father and son. It's 30 hectares. Did I pronounce it right? I'm having trouble with that one today.
That's okay.
The grandfather Luigi, worked in Florence, had property, started to make wine for friends, much like many of these great family stories. He was making wine for friends. It was just like, come by, fill up your demijohn, and decided he really wanted to focus on red wines and started planting reds in 1999. The winery opened in 2005. It's the second winery to open in Orvietano Rosso DOC. They have an old vineyard that still has the old married vines, which we saw those in Umbria. We saw those in Montefalco as well. What was interesting is here's where we saw all that unusual collection of shells.
Yes, in a display case.
Yeah, it was quite remarkable. In the distance, you see the Antinori estate that we didn't visit, the Castello. Footnote to do that because it's quite grand.
Quite beautiful.
Quite grand, yes. It's called... And
we also tasted the Antinori wines as well.
Yeah, Castello della Sala.
They make some beautiful wines.
Beautiful wines. Pietro is the winemaker, and it's run by the fourth generation. We tasted some terrific wines there. David, why don't you...
Well, they focus on red grapes mostly, but they do make a couple of whites, and they grow Pinot Grigio and they grow Chardonnay. And we tasted a lovely Chardonnay that they made that spent 3 months in oak. And it didn't have a name, so it's just Chardonnay.
Vita Longa.
And it was just really quite nice, crisp. It said 3 months in oak, so it wasn't barrel.
And they only use French oak.
Fermented. Yeah, wasn't barrel fermented. It wasn't, didn't go through ML, so it was a lighter, crisper style. I love Chardonnay. That wine. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, completely. Then they make a rosé out of Cabernet and Merlot,
right?
Which was also nice. Again, because it's a rosé and it's red grapes, they pick this early.
And 12.5%
Yeah,
ABV.
so it's picked in mid-August to make the rosé, whereas they hang the fruit on the vine much longer for the.
It's a
the
kind of
reds
a
that they
light
make.
garnet color.
Yeah.
Lots of orange and strawberry. I thought it was gastronomic. And what did they serve it with? It's just about died. They served it with truffle parmesan flan with shaved truffles. Okay, this winery, in addition to having vineyards and olive oils, is surrounded by forests, and inside the dirt and the ground are truffles. This, by the way, another selling point of why you want to go to Orvieto, it is truffle country. I think we had truffles on everything.
And there's no shortage. I'll be honest with you. There was truffles at every meal that we had if we wanted it. We did.
I just loved it. That was a good dish.
Summer truffles, fresh ones.
Yeah. So the Vitellunga Rosso 2022 DOC Rosso Orvietano is 60% Sangiovese, 40% Cabernet Sauvignon, aged 1 year in French Barrique, right? And it has the label had the Orvieto Cathedral on it.
Yes.
Yeah, from a local artist. That was kind of nice. And they served it.
Actually, they have a label series which is all famous art.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you can find Botticelli's Venus on one label, which is in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and then you can also find other obviously well-known artists on some of the labels that they do. It's a neat project. It's not all at the same time. They do one per year for this particular wine, but it was a nice project to see, and the wine was good. What I liked about the Vitellunga winery is when we went down into the cellar, there were Persian rugs and Asian and Oriental rugs all over the floor.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Well, we just sold all the old barrels, so now we're waiting for the new ones to come in, and we had to decorate somehow."
They do events.
Yeah,
they serve that wine with, well, for me, a tagliatelle with you did roast pork and roast cherry sauce for you, and for me, a wonderful tagliatelle with cherry tomatoes cooked in chili and garlic and Parmigiano. It was so delicious. The food there is terrific. I'd go back and just try that restaurant.
Yeah. And it's built into the winery, and they also have, as you said, they have a agriturismo that you can stay at. It's got 6 rooms, and they book it by the week during the season, but you can also then book it by the night in the off season.
And then the last wine, Ficule, Phiculle 2022. It's the name of the village where they are is actually Ficulle.
Yeah.
And it's 70% Cabernet Sauvignon, 30% Sangiovese. No. Yeah, that's right.
And it spends 15 months in oak.
Right.
Again, all French oak. And interestingly, if you're interested, the oak types that they use are Allier, Nevers, and Trancé, which are the forests that the oak barrels come from, or that the wood for the oak barrels come from.
I like this wine a lot. I had cacao, dark blueberries, and walnuts. It's just really yummy. I just loved it.
Did we talk about the Terra de Confini?
No.
So that's the one that was interesting to me. I mean, they all were, but what was interesting was that this wine, the Terra de Confine Rosso IGT, and Terra de Confine means borderland in Italian, which I kind of liked. I kind of want to use borderland somehow. But this wine was 80% Montepulciano.
Yeah.
And again, we were talking about the fact that this doesn't really come west from Abruzzo too often, but when it does, it doesn't get much farther than Orvieto and into Umbria. So Montepulciano, and then 20% Merlot.
Yeah, lovely wine.
And so this had that. It was very interesting of how they make it, because they dry the Merlot fruit, kind of like they would be making a Passito wine or making a Ripasso style wine or a wine from up in Valpolicella. They dry the Merlot portion, not the Montepulciano portion. So they make this and they bring it down to 70% juice. So they dry it about 30% of the moisture out of the fruit before they then press it off. And it was a very interesting wine for me.
Yeah. I mean, the labor involved in that, you just think about that. Now, we don't have a lot of time to talk about the dinner. We had a lovely dinner with, I think, 5 other producers, because there's just only so much time. And we'll go back and visit them all, of course. But we dined at several restaurants in Orvieto. And the one, I'm looking in my notes, I'm scrolling, guys. But this is the way I have to do it. Capitano del Popolo woman chef, Valentino Santanicchio. We met with about 4 or 5 producers there, including Antinori's wines, which are terrific. And just reaching my notes. Their San Giovanni della Stalla DOC was beautiful. We tasted from Battisti Domoranti and Orvieto Classico Superiore. This was so sweet. They all brought little tasting notes for us. Tenuta La Valette, the Orvieto Classico DOC Superiore. And this one is Cardetto Orvieto Classico. We had these paired with a meal. They were all terrific. We had a nice discussion with the producers about what Orvieto is today, what modern style Orvieto is, and what they want to be perceived as. It was a very interesting give and take.
It was.
Given that we're all dealing, the entire industry is dealing with, decreased consumption. But what's a selling point for these Orvieto wines is that white wines are on a rise. People are reaching for crisp, dry white wines. They're lower in alcohol. They're food friendly. And they just need to be tried and tasted and get out there.
They're really lovely wines. And they're unique in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because they are blends.
Yeah.
And blending is their lifeblood.
And blending is, that takes a lot of skill.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to think about that. That really takes a lot of skill. So hopefully you like this overview. It's easy to get to Orvieto. Go to Rome. Take a train.
And take a train up to Orvieto. It'll take about an hour.
Right. It's very easy.
So easy to get to.
Some people just go for the day, which we had in the past. But we would go and stay longer. There's a lot of restaurants, a lot of artisan shops, very known for ceramics in Orvieto. And in addition to the Orvieto Underground, you've got that beautiful Duomo. And then you have this very famous well, which we went all the way down 224 steps, that was dug for a pope because they wanted to make sure they had water. And you can do that tour as well. So anyway, we hope that this was interesting. We'll be writing it up on theconnectedtable.com. You can learn more. And we'll be talking to some of the producers in the upcoming months on the show. So we want to thank you for joining us. We want to thank the Consortio for Orvieto for working with us to create a beautiful itinerary. Thank all the producers. And check out all our shows on your favorite podcast channel, The Connected Table TV, Talk for Media TV. And please follow us and comment on Instagram at The Connected Table. We want you to explore and always stay insatiably curious. Thank you.